There is a version of you that exists only in the first few minutes after you wake up. Before the world reaches you, before your phone lights up with other people's emergencies, before the noise of the day convinces you that you are small. In that quiet window, something extraordinary is possible. You get to decide who you are going to be. Most people never use this moment. They let it slip by unnoticed, and by doing so, they hand over the steering wheel of their entire day to whatever happens to them first. A bad night's sleep, a rude message, a worry that crawled in during the night and refused to leave. And so the day begins on borrowed emotions instead of chosen ones. But there is another way to live. There is a method, quiet and almost invisible, that has shaped some of the most successful, grounded, and fulfilled people in history. It is not a secret ritual or a mystical practice. It is simpler than that, and because it is simple, most people dismiss it. They assume something that easy cannot possibly be powerful. That assumption has cost them years of their lives. The method is this: 5 sentences spoken every single morning with intention and belief before the day has a chance to speak first. 5 sentences that reprogram the direction of your thoughts, your focus, and eventually your results. This is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is not about lying to yourself. It is about choosing deliberately which voice gets to lead your mind before the world's noise tries to lead it for you. Let's talk about why this works, and then let's walk through exactly what to say and why each sentence carries the weight it does. For a long time, science avoided the topic of mindset and self-talk because it sounded too soft, too much like wishful thinking dressed up in nice language. But over the last several decades, something changed. Researchers in psychology and neuroscience began to take seriously what philosophers and successful people had been saying for centuries. The words you repeat to yourself are not neutral. They are instructions. Your mind, whether you like it or not, is always listening to you, and it takes what you say seriously, especially in the first waking moments when your brain is still soft, still impressionable, still moving between sleep and full alertness. Think about what happens in your brain right after you wake up. Neuroscientists have shown that for a short period after sleep, your brainwaves are still shifting out of the slower patterns of rest and into the faster patterns of wakefulness. During this transition, your subconscious mind is unusually open. It is like wet cement. Whatever gets pressed into it in those first minutes tends to hold its shape for the rest of the day. If the first thing you do is grab your phone and absorb bad news, comparison, and other people's opinions, you are pouring concrete over your own mind before you've even had the chance to choose what you wanted to build there. This is why the old idea of the first hour sets the tone for the day is not just poetic. It is biological. It is psychological. It is in many ways mathematical. Because whatever pattern you start with tends to compound. A calm, focused, intentional morning tends to produce a calm, focused, intentional day. A chaotic, reactive, anxious morning tends to produce a chaotic, reactive, anxious day. Not always, not perfectly, but often enough that the pattern becomes your life. Success, real success, the kind that lasts and feels earned rather than lucky, is built on the compounding of small decisions made consistently over time. Nobody becomes wealthy from one brilliant idea. Nobody becomes wise from one profound insight. Nobody becomes strong from one hard workout. It is the accumulation, the repetition, the quiet discipline done when no one is watching that eventually produces the visible result. Your morning words are exactly this kind of small decision. They seem insignificant on any single day, but stacked over months and years, they become the architecture of your identity. This is the deeper truth hiding inside this idea. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your self-image. If you see yourself deep down as someone who struggles, who is unlucky, who never catches a break, you will unconsciously sabotage opportunities that don't match that story, even while consciously chasing success. Your subconscious mind's primary job is not to make you happy. Its primary job is to keep your external reality consistent with your internal identity. This is why people who win the lottery often end up broke again within a few years. Their bank account changed overnight, but their self-image didn't have time to catch up, so they unconsciously found ways to bring their external world back in line with what they believed deep down they deserved. This is also why some people, starting with nothing, build extraordinary lives. Somewhere inside them, often long before they had any proof, they carried an unshakable belief that they were capable. that they were meant for more, that failure was only feedback and not identity. That belief acted like a magnet, pulling decisions, actions, and opportunities in its direction, even when the external evidence hadn't caught up yet. So the real question becomes, how do you install a new identity? How do you become, on the inside, the kind of person who naturally produces success on the outside? The answer researchers keep circling back to is repetition paired with emotion, done consistently, especially at times when the mind is most receptive. Morning is one of those times. And spoken words, said out loud with real feeling rather than mumbled passively in your head, carry more weight than silent thought alone, because speaking activates additional regions of the brain, reinforces memory, and signals to your nervous system that this is important enough to say out loud. This is not affirmation for the sake of feeling good for 5 minutes. This is identity engineering, and it starts with 5 sentences. The first sentence you say each morning should be a declaration of ownership, something like, I am responsible for my life, and I choose to build it well today. This single sentence, repeated with conviction, attacks one of the most dangerous mental habits a person can develop, the habit of blame. Blaming your circumstances, your upbringing, your boss, the economy, other people, bad luck. Blame feels good in the short term because it removes the weight of responsibility from your shoulders, but it also removes your power. If your circumstances are the reason for your results, then only a change in circumstances can change your results, and you are left waiting for the world to be different before your life can be different. Ownership flips this completely. The moment you say, and truly mean, that you are responsible for your life, you take back the steering wheel. This does not mean everything that happened to you was your fault. Life is often unfair, and pretending otherwise is naive. But how you respond to what happens to you, the meaning you assign to it, the actions you take next, these are always yours. This is one of the oldest ideas in human wisdom, echoed by ancient philosophers who taught that we cannot always control external events, but we can always control our judgment of them and our response to them. That single shift in focus, from what happens to you to what you do about it, is often the exact dividing line between people who stay stuck and people who transform their lives. Saying this sentence every morning trains your brain to automatically search for your role in any situation, rather than searching for someone or something to blame. Over time, this becomes instinct. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me, you start asking, what can I do about this? That single question, repeated across thousands of moments over a lifetime, is worth more than almost any other skill you could develop. The second sentence should address the voice of doubt directly, because doubt, left unchallenged, will quietly strangle every ambition you have. Something like, my past does not define my future, and I am capable of more than I currently believe. This sentence matters because most people carry an invisible ceiling in their minds, built from old failures, harsh words spoken by others, or comparisons made in childhood that they never consciously examined. That ceiling limits what they believe is possible for them, and because belief shapes action, they unconsciously stop trying for anything above that ceiling, even when the opportunity is right in front of them. Psychologists have long studied something called self-efficacy, which is simply your belief in your own ability to succeed at a given task. People with high self-efficacy try harder, persist longer through difficulty, and recover faster from setbacks, not because they are naturally more talented, but because their belief keeps them in the game long enough for their skill to catch up. Talent without belief quits too early. Belief without talent keeps showing up until the talent develops. This is why so many extraordinarily successful people were not the most gifted in the room when they started. They were simply the ones who refused to let their past failures write the ending of their story. By reminding yourself daily that your past does not define your future, you are actively dismantling the ceiling before it can limit today's decisions. You are separating what happened to you from who you are capable of becoming. This distinction matters more than people realize. A person who failed a business once is not a failure. A person who failed a business once is someone who has data, someone who has experience, someone who is now more equipped to succeed the second time. The story you tell about your past becomes the foundation you build your future on. Choose that story carefully. The third sentence should focus your mind on what actually matters today. because a mind without direction will default to whatever is loudest, not whatever is most important. Something like, today I will focus on progress, not perfection, and I will take at least one action that moves me forward. This sentence solves one of the most common reasons people stay stuck for years, the paralysis caused by wanting everything to be perfect before they begin. Perfectionism disguises itself as a virtue, but in practice it is often fear wearing a respectable mask. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, all hiding behind the socially acceptable excuse of "I just want to do it right." The problem is that waiting for the right conditions, the right moment, the right level of readiness often means waiting forever, because those perfect conditions rarely arrive. Meanwhile, someone else, less talented, less prepared, but more willing to move imperfectly, is out there gaining real experience, making real progress, and closing the gap between where they started and where they want to be. This sentence retrains your focus toward action over analysis, toward movement over stillness. It reminds you every morning that a small, imperfect step taken today is worth more than a perfect plan that never leaves the notebook. Historical figures who accomplished extraordinary things almost universally shared this trait. They moved before they felt fully ready. They understood that clarity often comes from action, not before it. You don't think your way into a new way of living nearly as often as you act your way into a new way of thinking. Saying this sentence daily also protects you from the exhausting trap of comparing your current chapter to someone else's highlight reel. Progress, by definition, meets you exactly where you are. It does not require you to be impressive yet. It only requires movement. The fourth sentence should be about gratitude, but not the shallow kind that gets tossed around carelessly. Something like, I am grateful for what I have, and that gratitude gives me the strength to build for what I want. This sentence might seem at first glance disconnected from ambition. How can being content with what you have coexist with hunger for more? But this apparent contradiction dissolves once you understand what gratitude actually does inside the nervous system. Chronic dissatisfaction, the constant feeling that you don't have enough, aren't enough, haven't achieved enough, creates a background hum of stress that drains your mental and physical energy before you even start your day's work. This stress response, when activated constantly rather than occasionally, narrows your thinking, increases anxiety, and makes creative problem-solving significantly harder. In other words, chasing success from a place of scarcity and lack often sabotages the very success you're chasing, because your brain is too busy defending against a perceived threat to do its best creative and strategic thinking. Gratitude interrupts this cycle. Numerous psychological studies have shown that consistent gratitude practice is associated with lower levels of stress hormones, improved mood, better sleep, and even stronger relationships, all of which are foundational to sustainable achievement. This is not about pretending you don't want more. It is about building your ambition from a place of security rather than desperation. There is a profound difference between running toward a goal because it excites you and running away from a feeling of not being enough. The first is sustainable and energizing. The second is exhausting and eventually collapses under its own weight. By starting your day with genuine gratitude, you shift your nervous system out of scarcity mode and into a state where clear thinking, patience, and resilience become far more accessible. And from that grounded place, your pursuit of more becomes an expression of growth rather than an attempt to escape inadequacy. The fifth sentence should look forward and plant a seed of expectation, because what you expect you tend to notice, and what you notice you tend to act on. Something like, good things are moving toward me, and I am ready to recognize and act on them. This sentence works with a well-documented psychological phenomenon sometimes called selective attention, or more specifically related to something researchers call the reticular activating system, a network in your brain that filters the enormous amount of information around you and decides what deserves your conscious attention. Here's a simple way to understand it. If you decide to buy a red car, you will suddenly start noticing red cars everywhere, not because more red cars appeared on the road, but because your brain now flags them as relevant. Your reticular activating system works the same way with opportunities, ideas, and people. If you walk through your days expecting scarcity and disappointment, your brain will quietly filter out potential opportunities as irrelevant noise because you haven't told it to pay attention to them. But if you walk through your days genuinely expecting good outcomes, your brain begins flagging relevant conversations, unexpected connections, useful information, and small openings that were there all along, but that you previously filtered out. This is not magical thinking. It is not the universe rearranging itself around your wishes. It is your own attention redirected by expectation, catching things your unfocused mind would have missed. Success often does not announce itself loudly. It shows up disguised as a passing comment, an unfamiliar person, an inconvenient opportunity that requires courage to take. People who expect good things are simply more likely to notice and act on these disguised openings, while people who expect nothing walk right past them without a second glance. So there they are, 5 sentences. Ownership over blame, belief over doubt, progress over perfection, grounded gratitude over anxious scarcity, expectation over resignation, spoken out loud, with real feeling, before the world has a chance to hand you its version of who you should be today. But here is the part most people miss, and it is the part that actually determines whether this practice changes your life or becomes another abandoned New Year's resolution. Saying these sentences once will do almost nothing. Saying them for 3 days will do almost nothing. The power is not in the sentences themselves. The power is in the repetition, held consistently, long enough for your subconscious mind to stop treating them as wishful thinking and start treating them as fact. Think about how a new belief is actually formed. It is not formed through a single dramatic moment, despite what movies would have you believe. It is formed the same way a path is formed through tall grass. The first time you walk through it, you leave almost no trace. The grass springs back. But if you walk the same path every single day, eventually the grass stops growing there altogether, and a clear trail remains, easier to walk than the surrounding grass. Your mind works the same way. The thoughts you repeat most often become the path of least resistance. Eventually, you don't have to force yourself to think a certain way. It becomes the automatic default route your mind takes. This is why so many people try positive thinking for a week, feel nothing dramatic happen, and give up, concluding that it doesn't work for them. They misunderstood the timeline. They were expecting a single walk through the grass to instantly become a paved road. Real transformation asks for patience most people are not willing to give, which is exactly why it remains rare, and exactly why those who do commit to it separate themselves so distinctly from everyone else. There's something else worth understanding here, something that explains why speaking these sentences out loud matters more than simply thinking them. When you speak, you engage additional parts of your brain involved in language processing, memory, and self-perception. You also, in a very real sense, hear yourself say it, which activates auditory processing centers alongside the areas responsible for meaning and belief. In simple terms, spoken words leave a deeper imprint than silent thoughts. This is part of why verbal commitments feel more binding than private intentions, why saying "I promise" out loud carries more psychological weight than merely deciding privately to do something. Your own voice, speaking your own chosen identity into the morning air, is a surprisingly powerful tool, and one that costs nothing and requires no special equipment. Consider, too, what this practice does to the emotional tone you carry into your interactions with other people. Emotions are contagious in ways most people underestimate. A person who begins their day grounded, purposeful, and expectant of good things tends to carry a different energy into their conversations than someone who begins the day anxious, resentful, or scattered. Other people, often unconsciously, respond to this energy. Opportunities are frequently created not by qualifications alone, but by the impression you leave on the people around you, an impression heavily influenced by the emotional state you're operating from. In this way, your morning practice doesn't just change your internal world. It quietly changes how the external world responds to you. It's worth pausing here to address something honestly. None of this means that saying 5 sentences each morning will magically erase real problems, solve financial hardship overnight, or replace the need for skill, effort, and strategy. This is not a substitute for hard work. It is the foundation that makes hard work sustainable and effective rather than scattered and exhausting. A person with the right mindset but no skill will eventually build the skill because their mindset keeps them showing up long enough to learn. A person with skill but the wrong mindset will often sabotage their own progress, quitting right before the breakthrough, or failing to recognize the opportunity even when it's standing right in front of them. Mindset and action are not competitors, they are partners. And this morning practice is designed to strengthen the partner that most people neglect entirely, the internal one. There is an old and simple truth that keeps proving itself true across every generation, every culture, and every field of achievement. You become what you repeatedly think, say, and do, not what you wish for occasionally, not what you hope happens to you, what you actually consistently, repeatedly reinforce through your thoughts, your words, and your actions. Most people spend their lives unconsciously reinforcing doubt, blame, comparison, and scarcity, simply because these are the loudest and most automatic thoughts that arise without effort. Choosing instead to consciously reinforce ownership, belief, progress, gratitude, and expectation is not the easy path. It requires showing up for yourself every single morning, even on days you don't feel like it, even on days when nothing in your external life has changed yet, even on days when it feels like talking to an empty room. But that discomfort, that daily discipline, is exactly the mechanism by which ordinary people become extraordinary. Not through one lucky break, not through one motivational video watched and forgotten, through the quiet, unglamorous, repeated choice to speak a better story into their own mind before the world gets the chance to speak a worse one. So here is what I want you to do, starting tomorrow morning, or better yet, starting right now if the time of day allows it. Before you check your phone, before you let anyone else's opinions, demands, or bad news reach you, say these 5 sentences out loud with real feeling, like you actually mean them, even if some small part of you doesn't fully believe them yet. Say them again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Not for 3 days, not for a week, for months, until they stop feeling like something you're saying and start feeling like something you simply are. You are responsible for your life, and you choose to build it well today. Your past does not define your future, and you are capable of more than you currently believe. Today you will focus on progress, not perfection, and you will take at least one action that moves you forward. You are grateful for what you have, and that gratitude gives you the strength to build for what you want. Good things are moving toward you, and you are ready to recognize and act on them. 5 sentences, 30 seconds of your morning, a lifetime of compounding difference. The version of you that you keep waiting to become is not going to arrive through a single moment of inspiration. It is going to arrive the same way every real transformation arrives, through small, repeated, deliberate choices made when no one else is watching and no immediate reward is visible. This is one of those choices. It costs you nothing but a few seconds and a willingness to take yourself seriously enough to speak your future before it happens. Most people will hear this and forget it by tomorrow afternoon. A few will actually try it, and a smaller few still will keep going long enough to watch their entire life quietly reshape itself around the words they chose to believe. Which one will you be? If this gave you something worth carrying into tomorrow morning, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Leave a like if you're committing to these 5 sentences starting now, and drop a comment telling me which sentence you needed to hear the most today. Your future is listening. Give it something worth building on.